Hi guys, it's Jared from BONE-FRAGMENTS. Welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be looking at the parts for the conventional rotary launcher, the CRL, and how to remove the supports from the parts as you receive them and how to prepare them for assembly. And then we'll move into the assembly. So let's get right into it. We'll start with the main components as you receive them. These are the main components that make up the main body of the CRL. When these parts all come together, they end up looking something like this. Okay, so we're going to call this is the front section, this is the center section, and this is the rear section. So no matter which version of the kit you buy, you will get at least these three parts. There are two different versions of the rear version. If you have bought the version that replaces the inbuilt wires with metallic wires, with metal wires. Those out of the way. So we're going to start with the number one piece, which is the front piece. This is this one here, and this one is probably the key to it, because all of the small wires that go on it mount to this, the boxes mount to this, the front plate, and this is the one that has the most supports on it. It actually has a built-in handle, if you were, at the end here, because of the delicate parts that are all in this. And we built this onto the end there, so you've got something to actually hold it with while you're assembling it. Once you get it connected into the barrel section in the center here, it gives you a bit more support to hold on to it. So first of all, we're going to remove the supports from this. Keep in mind that we're trying to get it to look like this. The end component here, this lug or locating tab, is actually inside this part here. Okay, it's been designed this way specifically for the 3D printing process, and all of these tiny little bits on the edge here are supports that are required in the build process, the printing process, that is. So let's get started on this. A few things to know with removing supports from 3D printed resin parts, if you're not already familiar with them, is the fragility or fragileness of the parts. And that is due to the nature of the resin that's involved. So I'll just show you on a piece here. Here's some supports that's been removed. If you just snap the parts, they break very easily. And where they connect to the kit part, if you do that, they will invariably leave a divot of some description in the kit part, which is kind of like this. These are what we call by divots. So if we snap that off, as you can see, it does that. So the key to removing supports from 3D printed resin is to use a razor saw of some description. So I've got a couple of different ones here. Blades, a bunch of different ones here to go. Okay, so what I'm going to start with here, I've got an optimizer on so I can see what I'm doing. I'm first going to remove some of the supports. I'll just move these out of the way. And you can do that for very tiny ones with something like a scalpel blade. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove these supports here to give me access to this bottom area here. Now, to make this job easier, what I suggest you do is you take this part, lightly sand the end of this there, and glue it to a rod of some kind. I've just used a large X-Acto knife handle. That then gives me a good surface to work on, a good whole solid handle to do it. So what I'm going to do here is very slowly and carefully, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to have a look. Very, very carefully. Just using tiny, tiny strokes. And there you can see that cut through there. Some of these are already cut through. Okay, as you can see, like that come through there. These larger ones here, they can be a bit more difficult. So you can with these tiny ones use nippers. Use very fine nippers if you've got them. Be careful if you're using nippers that you don't nip through and push the supports away from each other, causing expansion in a direction that will cause the fragile parts around it to break. So as you can see from that now, hopefully I've removed that there. That then frees that up to come in here. Now, go on to another one here. If the part is loose like this one is, you can just come in with nippers and take that off. So let's just clean up some of these in the meantime. So like this one here, if they're not actually connected to anything, the ones you get are not going to have little problems like this one does. So this was a failed print here, well, just on that one there. So this one there, because it's not connected to anything, I can snap that one off and it'll come off nicely. But you're all the time trying to protect the tiny, tiny parts. If you've got a sharp enough scalpel blade, you can cut through like that. Typically, the smaller the part, you can get away with that. So that there would probably be, I would consider that be too thick of a support there to cut through. So that's one where I'm going to go. Let's try a different one. Okay, come through in there like that. Right, it's worth looking at reference pictures as you're doing this. Make sure that the parts are going to be able to be removed, that it's not actually part of the structure. So if you work slowly and carefully like this one is. So you can see if I cut this here, this is the kind of divot. You don't get a nice flat, even the best nippers in the world aren't going to give you a flat area. It's just the nature of the material. So this is why we've built these supports actually in to the design of building the kit, building this part in Fusion. So these supports are not added from the slicing software used to prepare the part for 3D printing. gentle, gentle. Because what you're seeing is, stay still phone. So let's have a look at some of these tiny parts in here. So as you can see, there's actually holes in here. So these are cable runs that go in through these parts, around the parts, like these here. Those cables go onto the ends on both sides of those there. So that part there is, yep, fragile, broken off. That's right, as I said, these are second parts. I'm just showing you how to get this. Don't bend it, Jared. Okay, so I now see that we've removed all of those supports there onto that area. Let's just give it a bit of clean up. Now, if you are unlucky enough to snap something while you're in the process of doing this, and if I could stop hitting the camera with my head, if you've got the parts, you can use CA glue to build them up or to fix the parts, but just work slowly and carefully. The other thing to remember is that this is a rotary launcher. So in the bay, if you've got a part where, you know, you've got a tiny little flaw or something like that that's happened in the building of it, you can always position it in the kit so that that's not viewable or not to be seen, or get a replacement. But this particular component here is the most time-consuming and difficult part to actually print, and probably took the most work, design work, to do and get right out of the whole CRL project, apart from the BRUs themselves. So let's just pull these few pieces out. There's a lot of like lugs and bits and pieces like the blocks and stuff throughout this that are there on the real deal, and they actually don't necessarily connect to anything, and that's because this base structure that this is built based on is used for various different versions of it. So the actual nuclear weapons, the bomb, uses the same basic structure. It's all the electronics and the safeties and all that kind of things that make it conventional. So yes, this basic rotary mounting system was the same for all of the rotary launchers on the B1. So as you can see here, these components in here, very, very fragile. So I want to try and get those with some nippers. If you can separate each support before you try and remove it at the part, it usually gives less. What I should have done here is actually left these all in place until I had taken the base off. There we go, hopefully still with me. So let's have a look at, you can see these. Should be able to see that there's actual holes in these components. So right along in here, see through here, they've actually got mounting all holes on those. So all the wiring goes actually through all these tiny, tiny holes. Probably hard to see on this. So yeah, this can all be cleaned up after. These supports are there because when it's printing in the air, as it came out of the vat, they all need to have supports so that the little tiny arms and whatnot have got something to hold them against. If that makes sense. Again, very, very careful. Feel free to skip through some of this if you want, guys. Oh, how's that looking in there? Okay, so as you can see, this one is we had a little bit of delamination on this side here due to the supports being so fine. Just some very, very careful blade work in here. So this is why this kit is, this set is for experienced modelers only, and it's got a fair degree of difficulty in it. The building isn't so bad, it's getting it ready to go. Okay, so this particular part here has a little bit of a bend in it, as you can see there. So what we can do is not necessarily worry about it at this stage, because what I've found is on the real ones there is potentially some degree of variation in these. So perhaps just some slight heat. What you'll find is that once you put the wiring in, and the wiring goes through all those, you can see, hopefully you can see all the holes. Let's see. The wiring holes through that. So those holes are 1.5 mil in diameter. Sorry, 0.15 mil in diameter. So once you put your wiring through that and glued those in place, it's a lot easier to hold it in. Okay, so that is basically that there. We can now take this particular one off. Let's do my own rule and use the saw. So in the end, that whole piece will come off, and that will be a flat end, such as that, flat on the end there. Okay, traveling along nicely. So our next objective is to cut the base off here. Given that nice handhold there, makes it a lot easier. Let's just get rid of some of these supports. What I've found as well is the myriad of supports that you get on 3D printed kits can be great groundwork and debris type things for other models, such as dioramas. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to cut this across here. So we're going to get the saw and we're just going to very, very carefully work our way around it. So we've got quite that, come on camera, quite a good lip here. Let me bring in a block to give me some support here. Trusty 1, 2, 3 block to give me a good solid working surface. So all I'm doing here is rubbing up against the underside of the lip. And slowly working my way around. Trying to stay parallel. Now again, remembering that underneath this is the mounting lug. So we are not going to saw all the way through. Now, another thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is that the resin, like any kind of resin really, is toxic. So another option is to have some water around, put your blade in that, wear a mask. At this stage, I'm not going crazy. There's not a lot of resin dust in the air, but keep that in mind that you don't want to be breathing this stuff in. Now as you work your way around, you'll feel the blade get through the first section. So if you're watching this and you've bought the CRL, firstly I'd like to say thanks for getting it, buying it, but also thanks for your patience. It's been a real project over quite a few years now. As you might remember, the initial try at it using a regular, one of the first generation 3D printers, was just not giving the resolution. And then once we got a 4K resin printer, that's when we kind of got the results. And then getting the results, but having to design the printing and all of the supports, etc., just made it a long and involved process. So we've learned a lot, we've come a long way. Right, do you see that there? It sort of like slipped through, so that means we're sort of, I feel like I'm through there. Right, I think that's far enough through there. Now, this part is glued on, and so is the center section, the lug. So what we need to do now is we need to remove this. Let's do that. And let's see how we go. saw that. Ta-da. Right. So there's our part. Let's just clean that up a little bit with the brush. I'm going to grab some water here. A little bit of a dunk. Then let's see what we've got here. So again, see, that's where this handle comes in. Looks pretty good. Got that off there. Now, don't worry if that's not entirely flat through there, because what we can do is we can bevel the inside of this. So there's one we cut off earlier. It fits pretty good already across there. Now, we can either flatten that down across there by scraping through this or sanding this down, but I've found it's actually easier to take this part here and slightly bevel this kind of way out. Cut, cut, cut. You get the idea. To have that sit in there. It just depends on the angle you've cut through there, how much of that you need to do. You don't have to cut that extra bit off, it will go all the way through there. I'll fit in there. There is a possibility that if you've got long, not really, but the lugs on the BRUs could potentially impact that on that other side if you have left those fairly long, but they shouldn't. So right there. Right, so let's take that off. Yeah, well, that's one from earlier. So that's our part, ready to go. So just clean up this edge a little bit if you want to get that nice and flat to mount against the second part here. So now we're going to cut this part off here and these here. So let's do that next.